Welcome, everybody. This is Gary Van Antwerp from Training Magazine Network. I want to welcome you all today for a really special session that we have with Lenn Millbower. He's the president of Offbeat Training LLC, and somebody, probably the person I know with the most experience from time at Disney. Lenn spent 25 years in the Disney organization, so he has some great counterintuitive lessons that he learned from the Walt Disney World that he's going to share with us today, and we're grateful to him for doing that. If you're a user of the Insights widget, especially if you're watching the recording of this session, you can click the link right there on the screen and to launch the widget, and that's where you can list what you learned in the session, to archive it, and also you'll be able to see what other folks who have attended the session, what they listed as what they learned, so there is an opportunity to share there. And then if you like, you can click to print your certificate proving that you attended the session and learned from it. It'll list everything that you listed down here, okay? If you need help with how to do that, you can talk to me after the webinar ends, or just go to the Contact Us part of Training Mag Network, and you will see information on how to use the Insights widget. Okay. Training Magazine's live and online program continues. We have several new courses starting up. One starting today, Rise 360, if you're not familiar with Rise by Articulate. That'll be coming up again in the fall. And then Storyline Fundamentals, if you're a Storyline user or you want to be, starts on July 16th. Go to trainingaliveandonline.com. You can learn all about all the different courses that are offered to enable you to earn a certificate to show your professional development efforts to your organization and so forth. We have a great webinar coming up this Friday. You can join Mike Parkinson of $1 Billion Graphics for a special workshop presentation, building stunning PowerPoint templates that work. So when you register, you'll receive a valuable graphics and templates resources package that's yours to use right away in the session. So you can click on your screen right there and on that slide to learn more about it, or I'll return that us to that slide at the end of the webinar in case you don't want to do that right now. Okay, so, and there is also, no, there's not. Never mind that other part. All right. The TechLearn conference is coming up, so you can go to techlearn.com to learn all about the Training Magazine's TechLearn conference. It'll be in New Orleans in September. I hope you come and see us. I will be there, and as well as other people from the training team. And we have a number of other webinars coming up, notably this July 16th one, with Felice Banner and Monica Cornetti and Michael Orth. Monica is, of course, very well known in the gamification space, so she will be leading this along with Felice, and then they'll be leading into their sessions at the TechLearn conference. So it's a great place to learn all about that and get some great information on gamification there. More webinars coming up this week. And as well, Lenn has, as I mentioned before, Lenn has these additional webinars coming up on in March and June of 2020. So you can click there to read all about those webinars and even to register for them. And to get updated on everything, you can click on the Train Mag Network icon for Twitter and follow us. One last thing here, to find the recording of this webinar, you can just go to trainingmagnetwork.com, the homepage, right? And then over on the right-hand side, click on the Recorded Webinar Archive button. The recording for this session, that we're going to do right now, will be listed at the top of that archive page by tomorrow morning. So that's how you can find it. You can also just scroll down here beneath the upcoming webinars to find the latest recordings, okay? All right. Well, it's time to go ahead and get started. And so once again, I'd like to introduce to you Lenn Millbower. He's the president of Offbeat Training LLC. And again, the session today, Counterintuitive Lessons Learned from the Walt Disney World. And Lenn, here we go.
The year is 1928, and this is a terrible train ride. He was traveling back from New York to California by way of Kansas City. He'd gone to New York to renew his company's contract with the distributor. See, he needed more favorable terms because he spent so much money making the product excellent that his company was always broke. Well, imagine his shock and then despair And then anger when he discovered that there would be no favorable terms. The distributor owned the copyright to the product and had hired away most of his staff and would produce the product with or without him. Well, he was destroyed, but not defeated. On that train ride, he got to work, he brainstormed, and he created a new product. That product would make his company rich beyond his wildest imagination, and in the process, enrich all of our lives. That product, of course, was Mickey Mouse, and the man was Walt Disney. And the Disney story is an interesting one. When the brothers went to Hollywood, they only had 2 employees, the 2 brothers, Walt and Roy. They had no revenue. Hollywood didn't respect them. They had no popular brands. They had no box office receipts. They just had the 2 of them. Now, compared to now, 2019, 170,000 plus employees, $60 billion in revenue, top 20 employer, wildly popular brands, and they're guessing that Disney will take in 1/2 of all 2019 box office revenue this year. Now, if you think about the Disney product, you can't escape it. It's everywhere. They own all these brands and more. I couldn't get them all on the screen. And they've closed on 20th Century Fox. So now they own all the 20th Century Fox stuff, too. Just a considerable amount, including Star Wars, and next week they start filming the new Indiana Jones film. And then, of course, the Marvel characters and the Muppets. They've become really successful. Now, of course, where I was and where Gwen was at Walt Disney World, which is the Magic Kingdom in the upper left, Epcot in the upper right, Hollywood Studios in the lower left, and Animal Kingdom in the lower right. So most of what I talk about today is going to be focused on those 4. Now, I have a question for you. Normally, I would ask how many people have been to the various parks. It's kind of hard to do this with a screen share. So I'm going to assume that a fair amount of you have visited the parks, and if you haven't visited the parks, well, then you've certainly watched the films or the animated characters or Pixar or the Muppets. So why do you think Disney achieved success? And what I'd like you to do is type in the window, and Gary will read out a few of the comments.
You bet.
Why do you think Disney has achieved its success?
And we have imagination. It says over-managing, I think, is going pretty quickly. I think that's it. Customer focus and family friendly are there. A lot of customer focus. And innovation is in all caps. So superior customer service, many times we're seeing customer experience. Lenn, would you like more?
No, that's pretty good. That's good stuff. You know, Walt was an interesting guy. He had 1 foot in nostalgia and 1 foot in future technology. He was always both simultaneously looking backwards and forwards, and that led to a lot of innovations. Now, this is my bona fides. We're not going to spend much on this, but in the upper left is me on the land boat ride with a lot more hair and a lot less middle. And down at the bottom, you can see me getting my leadership diploma, and then at the far right, getting my Partners in Excellence Award. Lower left is me being a friend of Eeyore's. So, one bit of legal stuff. I don't work for Disney anymore. This presentation is not endorsed by, sponsored by, recommended by, in any way connected to the Walt Disney Company. If you like the presentation, it's not their doing. If you didn't like it, it's still not their doing. This is just my observations from having spent so much time there. And having said that, then, let's move forward with these observations. Here are 5 counterintuitive lessons I'd like to talk about today. Lesson 1, be as emotional as possible. Lesson 2, don't make decisions. Lesson 3, employees first, customers second. Lesson 4, if you want it done, do it yourself. And Lesson 5, process matters more than product. And we'll find out if this works, but I hope to prove each of these to you and offer you examples. So let's start with number 1, be as emotional as possible. You know, this picture here is very emotional. The train whistle brings in the nostalgia, the conductor waving from the train, the floral that everybody lines up to take a picture in front of. This is the entranceway to a old-time movie theater of the past. And then you walk through a tunnel and you're into the Magic Kingdom. So then the emotion hits you. So one of the things Disney does is to be as emotional as possible. Now, I know we have some folks from Walmart on board here today, and I'm glad to have you here. And for the rest of you, I want you to think about something. Can you beat Walmart on price? And the answer is probably not. After all, Walmart's Save Money, Live Better motto explains it all. The only way you can beat Walmart, if you want to beat them, is on experience. Now, this picture here shows a Apple store on the right and a Microsoft store on the left. Now, the thing to know about this picture is both of these pictures were taken within 5 minutes of each other at a mall of the Millennia in Central Florida when the mall just opened, and both of these stores just opened. Now, the Microsoft store, the one on the left, is at the entrance to the mall. The Apple store is not at the entrance. You have to walk a ways once you get in the store, go down an escalator, and then walk back to virtually underneath the Microsoft store. And yet, the Apple store is packed, and the Microsoft store is empty. Now, is it that the Apple products are so much better? I don't know. I'm in the Apple ecosystem, but I have to confess the notebook that Microsoft sells is pretty darn interesting. What I would suggest to you instead is going on is it's almost like being in a club. Now, Walt Disney knew this. Here's what he said. Others hit the intellect. We hit emotion. Those who appeal to intellect only appeal to a very limited group. So, see, Disney wasn't your usual CEO. He wasn't worried about product in the way most people worry about product. He was worrying about connecting with people emotionally. And to that end, instead of having vision statements, mission statements, core values, he had a purpose statement. There's this marvelous story about a train conductor at Disneyland. Now, candidly, this guy is not that train conductor. It's just the only train picture I could personally snap. But the story goes that he was gruff, this train conductor. He was not somebody who was being very happy. And Walt went up to his boss and said, see if you can cheer this guy up. We're in the happiness business. If you can't make him happy, he needs to go somewhere else. Well, he did pretty soon. But that was Disney's motto. We create happiness. And that's their purpose statement. And that's what they try to do. And rather than having a big corporate vision statement and a big corporate mission statement, every team member knows that their job is to create happiness. And within creating happiness, that means that, well, the security guards, as a for instance, Walt fired the franchise group he brought in for the first 6 months of the operation of Disneyland because they were part-time police officers. Now, police officers are used to looking for suspicious activity. So the people that Walt had hired were, in Walt's eyes, giving his guests a hard time. So he replaced them with his own people. And he said, we tell the security guards they are there to help. Their role is to make, or their overall goal is to make people happy. Their role is to check bags and do the things that have to be done to protect people. So when you have a purpose statement, like we create happiness, then your people can perform the tasks within their role. So for instance, for this custodian, his primary task is to keep the place clean so that people can feel happy. After all, dirty does not make magic. It doesn't make people happy. But in conjunction with that, when he has spare time, he can do things like what he's doing here. Rather than just standing on the street waiting for some trash to drop, He's drawing, I guess he's drawing Donald there. Not quite sure which one. Yeah, it looks like Donald. And you see there's a Goofy he drew off to the right. Because his purpose is to make people happy. His task is to keep the place clean. Now, one way Disney reinforces this, and this is a rare thing to catch, this is a photograph of Epcot right before the park opens at like 5 minutes of 9 in the morning, and the front entrance, the guest relations, some of the operations folks are all gathering right inside the entrance, and we as guests were standing on the other side of the turnstiles, and they are getting their morning track talk. They call them track talks because they originated in rides that had ride tracks. And during these track talks, they'll share required information for the day, attendance figures, if any celebrities will be there, if there's any attractions that are down, or other things they need to know about. But the key point here is they also spend time talking about how some Disney employee, usually who's in the group, has made a guest happy. And they continually share these stories in every meeting. So they're reinforcing happiness. Now, you might think, well, that works in a theme park. But what about somewhere else? And I know we have several healthcare folks in the group, the Adventist, Banner, the Children's Hospital, Johns Hopkins, Meridian, and my own personal favorite, Heart of Florida folks. We've used your facilities several times down here. But they will know what I'm talking about here. HCAPs is the Health Consumer Assessment of Healthcare Providers and Systems. So what it is it's federally mandated. This is the really interesting thing about it. The government holds back some of the money you should be reimbursed from Medicare, 1.75, and your amount of level of reimbursement goes up based on the positive reviews you get. Now let me extend that a little bit and say that the positive reviews aren't on how well you ran the machine or did the operation. The positive reviews and the survey that they have to fill out for HCAPs evaluates how did they make you feel. How did they talk to you? Did they give you a pill when you said you needed it? It's based on emotion. And I was brought in by the Hamilton healthcare system because their scores were in pretty bad shape. If you look at this graph here, and this was publicly posted information, so anyone who has a choice about what hospital to go to can look at it and say, oh, I don't want to go to Hamilton, because they're all the way down at the bottom. And they were losing thousands and thousands of dollars a year because they weren't making people happy. Well, we put in place a purpose statement for them. We serve with compassion. The serve was the technical because they're providing that service. But what had been missing was the compassion. And if you look at the graph on the right, their scores went up and they stood to gain $200,000 to $300,000 more dollars a year in payback from the federal government because it was based on emotion. So that's my point, is to be as emotional as possible. You can connect with people on price, and that if you're as good as Walmart, that works. But if you can't keep your prices that low, then you have to connect on emotion. And what's really interesting, I think, about some of what Walmart's doing is Walmart is also trying to connect with you emotionally. And I've been able to develop relationships with the people at my local Walmart because they are doing that as well. So if you're emotional, people will actually spend more. They'll come back for the experience because they have a connection with you. So here's my suggestion. Know why your organization exists, and not we run theme parks, but we want to make people happy, and we do that through theme parks. Define that purpose in a pithy phrase. You know, the problem with visions and missions is they're so long-winded that frontline folks don't understand them. We create happiness. We serve with compassion are simple, and they can be mantras for the whole of the organization. And then you champion it. You tell stories. You praise success. And most importantly, you demonstrate it. You live it yourself, and you make sure you align tasks to purpose. So that's the first one. Be as emotional as possible. Second one, don't make decisions. Now, what I'm meaning by that is you can make all the decisions, but then you're going to be on the stick for every time there's an issue, you're going to be pulled in. And instead, it's better if you set it up so that the people who work there can make the decisions and you can just ratify. Now, this picture here is at the Whispering Canyon Cafe, and these folks were kind enough to let me take their picture. They have a few bottles of ketchup on their table. You may have noticed that. See, this place is a smokehouse. They're not really fond of ketchup. So, I don't know, Gary, if you have a moment. Gary and I were there, and what happened when you asked for ketchup?
Everybody in the place will bring you ketchup, as many bottles as you can possibly tolerate on your table, and they'll keep bringing you ketchup until you tell them to stop.
It's very funny. But here's the thing. If a leader had said, okay, now here's what everybody's going to do. You're going to take ketchup from table to table, it wouldn't have worked. This actually came from the frontline cast members who decided that one way they could have fun in this place was to make a statement about not liking ketchup in a fun way. And so one of the cast members said, hey, I know what we'll do. We'll bring ketchup from table to table. I don't believe it would have worked if it came from management. So Walt very much wanted people to make decisions on their own. I love this quote. Cinderella believed in dreams, but she also believed in doing something about them. When Prince Charming didn't come along, she went over to the palace and got him. Translated into the point I'm trying to make is that you can sit there and bitch about leadership and dream about things being the way you want them, or you can go make things happen with the backing of your leaders. So the leaders you don't need to go to Prince Charming. I don't know how many of your leaders are Prince Charming, but you get the point. Now, Disney's put some parameters in place, because in their case, you can't just say, go make people happy, because that could be very expensive. So what Disney's put in place are what I call operating priorities, and there are 4. Safety, courtesy, show, and efficiency. And they are prioritized. So this lovely lady here, she is at the Land Grill in the Land Pavilion at Epcot, and she's holding a basket with pins for pin trading purposes. So she's doing a courtesy thing with guests right now, because I'm assuming the restaurant isn't so busy that she's got something else going on. Well, let's draw some scenarios. Let's say, because that is a restaurant behind her, somebody on the ramp right behind her spills some water. And there's ice cubes on that carpet. And she's standing right there. And she's got a guest in front of her talking about a pin. So she's going to think in her mind, is this a safety issue? Is this a courtesy issue? Is this a show issue? Is this an efficiency issue? Well, it's obviously a safety issue because somebody could slip and fall on the ice. So knowing that filter, she will say to the guest, look, I'm sorry, I have to take care of that, but if you stay right here, I'll come right back and we'll trade that pin. And she goes, either takes care of the ice cubes herself or finds somebody to secure the area, and then she comes back to the guests. Okay, so let's say there's no ice spilled, but somebody is asking her a question from behind her. Is that a safety issue? No, not yet. Is it a courtesy issue? Yes, she's got 2 guests she's got to talk to. Is it a show issue? Well, it could be if the guest behind her gets belligerent. Is it an efficiency issue? It is preventing her from talking to the guest in front of her. So she would probably turn around and say to the guest behind her, I'll be right with you. Please wait a second, sir. And finish the pin trade with the guest in front of her, and then turn around and deal with the gentleman and whatever he's asking. Okay, different scenario. Let's say it's not water and ice that's spilled, but it's a empty cup that is on the ground. Better yet, let's say it's a napkin and a straw that's on the ground. And she sees it there. Is it a safety issue? Maybe, but not a big one. Is it a courtesy issue? Yes, if she leaves the guest she's talking to. Is it a good show issue? It is not good show. Is it an efficiency issue? No. So she knows she's got a show issue, but courtesy is more important than show. So she's going to spend time talking to her guests, and when that's done, she's going to go around the corner and pick that up. And in Disney terminology, efficiency happens when safety, courtesy, and show are all done effectively. Now, the interesting thing is, many of the organizations I've dealt with know safety, and they get efficiency. Courtesy is kind of innate, or they're all working on it. Very few of them understand show. So we're going to first look at, let me talk about my buddies in Hamilton Healthcare. I tried to get them to come up with their own priorities, and much to my surprise, in a healthcare setup, they came up with the same 4. And if you think about a hospital, safety is number 1, being courteous is next, then worrying about the show after that, and efficiency last, unless somebody's having a heart attack, but that goes right to safety. So it worked better for them than not having a priorities example. Okay, so how do you define how people behave from a courtesy standpoint? Again, safety's pretty well figured out. Efficiency's pretty well figured out. But Disney has established something it calls the Disney Basics. There are 4 of them, and every team member knows that this is what they are supposed to do with guests. Point 1, I project positive image and energy. These aren't surly cops. Point 2, I am courteous and respectful to all, especially children. Point 3, I stay in character and play the part. And you can see this with these 2 cast members. The lady on the left is at the Haunted Mansion gift shop, and she's holding dead roses, and that's how she smiled when I took her picture. And the lady on the right is across the street at the Liberty Tree Tavern, ringing the bell, hollering that the food is ready. They're staying in character, and they're playing the part. And point 4 is I go above and beyond. This young lady here, she was an exchange student from France. My wife and I were sitting on the balcony at Animal Kingdom Lodge, just watching the critters, and you can see the savannah right in front of you. You can see the giraffes walking by and all the hoof stock and some birds. And she noticed that we were spending a lot of time on the balcony, so she brought this bird over and she did some bird training right in front of us while talking to us. He did this for 2 days. That was going above and beyond. That was not in her job description. So there are the 4 Disney basics. Project positive energy, courteous and respectful, stay in character, go above and beyond. The beauty of a parameter like that is that the frontline person can make decisions for themselves. You don't have to make the decisions if you are the leader. All you have to do is coach, guide, mentor, suggest, assist, help, and discipline if you must, based on their level of performance. Okay, I also said that a lot of organizations don't get show. This is a hotel room door. It's the back side of the door. And for my friends at Choice Hotels who are listening, this is not one of yours. This is at another chain. And what's really interesting is the sign hanging on the door handle says, "Stay relaxed." But if you look at all the smudge marks on that door, now this is inside the room. This is my room. These are not my smudge marks. So that's a show miss. What's it say to your guest when the back of the door looks like this? What's in the sheets then? Has the toilet really been clean? How are they handling the room? Here's another example. This is a pet store, veterinarian, and they've received lots of compliments and thank yous for how they've treated the pets that have come into their place. The problem is it's gotten somewhat cluttered, And when you look at these things, they're curling up, and they're all 2 or 3 years old. So what's that say? They're in the room all the time, but are they not paying attention to what's been posted? And if they don't have any comments that are more recent, say 6 months ago, are those doctors still there? Did they leave? It is sending a bad show message. And would you want to get your pastries from this supermarket? Probably not. So Disney has this methodology when you are not making decisions in the boardroom and instead you're letting the frontline person make decisions. You can ask them to look for show hits and show misses. Now, a show hit is something like what you see on the left, which is just beautiful scenery and the water tower and everything looks right. And a show miss would be if the guests saw what you see on the right. So on the left is a show hit, on the right is a show miss, and that's the roundhouse. You don't want the guests to see that. And the idea is that any employee in any location can say that's a show hit or that's a show miss, and they have the permission to fix it. And if it's not fixable by them, to let somebody else know, to get it to a leader immediately so it can be fixed. And in that way, you keep everything nice and clean and tidy. Okay, so don't make decisions. So instead, you identify your priorities and expectations. You share those with your team. You support and champion team members who exceed those expectations. And you focus all eyes on the show and praise those who tell you what is wrong, even if you disagree. Okay, I've been talking for a bit of time now. And I thought the easiest thing to do here, rather than just throwing up polls, was to ask you what your questions, what your comments, what your rants are, because people seem to have a lot of questions about Disney. So I'm going to turn it over to Gary for a couple minutes while he reads out a couple questions that come in, and I'll
we
try
have
to answer
some folks are working on them right now, Len. So we should have a few in a moment. One of the questions we always get is, how do I get hired at Disney? We might want to put that in the parking lot till the end, but I think, Len, you'll be able to address that, right?
Yeah, well, I can say that I can answer it very quickly. Move to Florida, start at the bottom, unless you have a specific skill. But they get so many resumes a month that you don't usually get to come in at the top. And training is not professional there in the standpoint that they raise trainers, they don't hire them.
So, Len, Lonnie wanted to know, how did they do this, or how did they do this from the start with 2 to 170,000?
Yeah, well, the how did they get this big? Is that what he's really asking?
The question. Were they able to nurture this culture as they grew so quickly and so large? How's that?
Sure. That's a better question. Truthfully, it all started with Walt. He was just an average guy. He was a brilliant creative, but he was an average guy. And he wanted to call everybody by first name, and when the place got too large, then they started wearing name tags. And when they opened the Disneyland, they spent a year getting their act together, probably more than that. I mean, it just didn't spring up overnight. There's a great quote from Walt that basically says, get an idea, dog it, and work at it, and do it until it's done and done right. And they've continually refined the product and the delivery of the product over a period of many years. I'll give you one example. Safety, courtesy, show, efficiency was originally safety, show, courtesy, capacity. They changed capacity to efficiency so that it could expand beyond attractions, and they moved courtesy up above show when they were determining that guests were not getting the courteous treatment they should because people were adhering too much to the show. So it's a continual process, but the key to making that process work is having a goal. And in their case, the goal was ruthless focus on
And
making
your
people
answer
happy.
led right into Carol's question, Len. You mentioned that this all started with Walt. Well, how do they maintain that original purpose now that Walt has been gone or is gone?
I think that's a continued struggle. I think that's very hard, and it used to be when I was there, when Gwen was there, it was easy to hire in people because everybody remembered Uncle Walt on TV. Well, that memory is fading, and I think it's going to be more difficult as time goes on. But what it does require is leaders of the caliber of a Bob Iger or a Michael Eisner who are very focused on maintaining the legacy while continually bringing it into the future. Again, the thing to remember about Walt is he had 1 foot in nostalgia, 1 foot in the future. And you can maintain it if you continually articulate this purpose, continually remind people of it, while at the same time expanding into other venues and avenues.
Thank you, Len. Excuse me. Dana asked, of course, the next logical question: what training does the staff go through for that message to be received and reinforced and so forth?
Okay, there's an initial training called Traditions, and it's been many years since I've taken it, so I can't tell you how long it is or what exactly its content is. But a large part of Traditions is built on legacy and your job in preserving the legacy and the expectations of you for preserving that legacy and the things that, like the courtesy and the priorities that I just showed you are all taught there. And then you go to your local areas where it is explained how those things apply in your local area. And it really does require leadership speaking this message all the time, every meeting. It's not, otherwise it's a flavor of the month. It has to be really in the bones of everyone in the organization, included all the way through the hiring process. That being the case, Gary, I'm going to move on if we're okay. Still there?
I am indeed, Len. Sorry, I was muting myself. Before you go on, I just want to give you a comment from one of our longtime members, Tusimi. Tusimi is in Nigeria, and I just want you to know she has a message here in the chat. Hi, Len. Such a pleasure to hear from you. I'm holding your book, Showbiz Training. It was a great inspiration during my early years of training. So I thought you'd like to know that.
Oh,
thanks.
Very kind. Very kind. Thank you. All right. Well, now let us go on to number 3. Employees come first, customers come second. This picture here is of my friend, Steven Superak, known as Skippy, who was one of my mentees many years ago at Epcot. He's now, I'm proud to say, one of the big poopah managers of entertainment at Magic Kingdom. And he's pointing to his name on this, what looks like a chalkboard, but that's not what it is. It is a pillar for the brand new Tron roller coaster being built at the Magic Kingdom. And what leadership did is they had all the employees who could get there come over to the pavilion and sign the pillars before they got installed. And now the guests will never see these pillars, but each of these cast members will know that they forever are enshrined and have something to do with that Tron roller coaster. That's how you put your employees first. And the idea is, as Bob Iger explained, current CEO, I want Disney to be admired and respected by the employees. We call them cast members. Because if we ultimately are going to be admired and respected by our shareholders and our customers, it has to start at home. And that starts with the employees. So over a period of years, they came up with a model for how leaders should behave at Disney. A great leader delivers a satisfying cast member experience. Cast members who feel valued deliver a satisfying guest experience. Guests who are satisfied spend more money, come back, become loyal, and business profits result. Now, in a hospital setup, as a for instance, you could say, well, yeah, you're having a heart attack, you're going to go where the ambulance takes you. True, but if you're having elective surgery, you have a choice. And if you perceived as a patient that you've been satisfied and you were valued by the team members, then you'll go back to that place. So this is the formula that leaders are expected to deliver under. And these days, Disney leaders are given 3 attributes to meet in their evaluations. They are expected to be positive, knowledgeable, and accountable. Positive in the way they behave towards their people, so that their people will behave that way towards the guest. Knowledgeable in that they know the operation and can share information with the team and take part in that training and articulating the mission of creating happiness. And accountable because, and I got to tell you, Disney team members hate this when somebody is dragging. They want them held accountable. Now, with the CEO of the hospital system at Hamilton, he was very engaged in making things better. So he would run down the hall to a meeting. And his people didn't understand the engagement. They thought he didn't want to talk to them. So we actually convinced him to leave his office 5 to 10 minutes earlier than he needed to and walk down the hall relating to people, not rushing. You know, when we're a trainer or a leader or any sort of boss, we tend to think that if we get our tasks done, we are doing our job. But the Disney model is you get your tasks done, but you do it within the context of relating to people. So one interesting thing Disney has done is its recognition programs are governed by team members. Now, this woman was so proud of the guest fanatic card she got that she posted them online. And the way this system works is anyone can give a congratulations to anyone else. It doesn't require coming from a leader. It's not paternal, like you have done well, my child. In fact, a frontline person can reward a leader. And then once a month they go into drawings for movie tickets and the like. It's really cost-effective and caste-governed. Another thing they do is team experiences. Now, yeah, Disney's got an advantage. They can take you on a backstage safari or a backstage tour of the trains, or they can get together as a group and do something in cleaning up a park. But I'd like to show you something that a doctor did. And by the way, I also know we have some Vida people in the house. This was a Vida medical office. This team had everyone pick a decade that they liked and say what they liked about it. And then they all got pictures taken dressing like that decade. And the interesting thing is, this is my wife's doctor. And she's dressed as a flapper. Now, you think sometimes, oh, well, it's too serious, we can't do something like that. But not only did she do this, but this poster was posted in a public area. So if you can't take the team someplace, maybe you could do a team activity as simple as that. Certainly, the Vida group figured that out. Okay. Tips. Employees come first. So be positive and out and about, not in the office. Share knowledge and information. Involve your team in recognition. Host community events and team experience and discuss hard decisions with them openly and hold the poor performers accountable. I'm going to move on to number 4. If you want it done, do it yourself. Now that does seem counterintuitive, but the point is, if you don't do something, nobody else will. There's this marvelous story about Walt Disney walking through Tomorrowland with the supervisors of Tomorrowland at Disneyland and saying, oh, that trash can's overflowing and there's trash on the ground. And the supervisor for Tomorrowland said the wrong thing. He said, I'll call custodial. Well, of course, Walt being Walt, he went and picked the stuff up himself. And that supervisor was soon gone. The point is, you need to be there and doing things and be the role model. Like when his supervisors got a tour of Disneyland as it was being built, they asked where the administration building was going to be. He said, no, there isn't going to be one. I don't want you guys here. I want you out in the park. I want you with the guests. I want you with your customers. And now this thing about picking up trash, they still do it to this day. These two ladies are managers at Disney's Hollywood Studios, And look, they have the grabbers to pick up trash. It is part of the culture. And I know that question that was asked before, how do you inculcate this in the culture? You do it yourself. You demonstrate it. Now look at this picture. Here we have what is the perennial great employee. I mean, this guy's got a bubble machine. He's blowing bubbles. He's got a Buzz Lightyear mitt. It says to infinity and beyond as he cracks it. And he's smiling, and that little girl's enthralled. And he is a great employee, maybe? No, actually, he's an area manager. And by the way, this is like 8:30 in the morning, and this guy is showing his cast how to make people happy. So he knows that purpose statement, and he's living it. Now, I also know that we have somebody here from Smith Foods, so maybe you might find this interesting. At Lowe's Foods, which is one of the areas one of the companies I worked with, they have this chicken kitchen, and they decided that whenever the chicken comes out of the oven, they're going to do the chicken dance. Now, imagine you as a leader, or even as a trainer, saying, okay, you're going to do the chicken dance 5 times a day. Well, most employees might not go for that. However, if your leaders are willing to do it, then you're more willing to do it. And this picture is of the executive board, all the leaders of Lowe's Foods out there doing the chicken dance for the media. So the point is, if you want people to do something, you do it yourself. You demonstrate the behaviors you expect. You do for them what you want them to do for customers. You get in the trenches with them. You don't be afraid to get dirty. If you're in a restaurant situation and the dishwasher calls in, one of the best things that can happen is for a manager to be seen washing the dishes. You get in there and you do it yourself in a counterintuitive way. Okay, one more time. Do we have any questions, comments, rants about anything I've said so far? I know I've been talking 90 miles an hour. So what are your thoughts? Gary, are you
sorry,
there?
Lenn. Yes. Ronan asked earlier, how are they inspecting employees? Or let me broaden it. How does Disney hold people accountable for implementing the 4 priorities? Is it just from word of mouth, from guests, or is it management by walking around, or all of the above? We have a lot of questions about accountability on this.
Yeah, all of the above. I will tell you that I'm currently working with a utility company to change their culture, and we have just redone their annual evaluation forms and aligned those forms with what they put together for their priorities and their purpose and their service factors. What gets measured gets done. One of the problems a company will have, and this was a particular problem with Lowe's Foods when I first started working with them, the store managers were measured on profitability. They weren't measured on customer satisfaction. So, of course, they're going to push profitability and efficiency to their team members. The system had to be changed, so the entire focus was not on efficiency and cost cutting. And that still has to be there. But the focus needed to be on pleasing customers. So I'll give you a simple example. There's a supermarket. Can I help you find something? That's nice, but it's very task-driven. So instead at Lowe's, we train them to say, hi, what's for dinner tonight? And that opens up a whole emotional conversation with the guests. So you very much have to build this into every bit of your structure. From your hiring, you want to test that they fit your culture during the hiring process, during all your training, the global training, the local training, every meeting, reinforcing every step of the way, and building it into raises, promotions, disciplines, and terminations. You have to align the whole system. It doesn't work unless you do.
Here's another one. There's a common thread here. We're talking about training. We're talking about accountability and so forth. But what role do Disney's hiring and onboarding processes play in this? How do they impact the culture? Do we just hire anybody and then try to train them, or what?
Okay, great question. And candidly, because I'm not there anymore, and I'm certain they're not going to hire me, I haven't been into casting in a very long time. I can tell you what was. Disney is a mecca for hiring. I mean, people just want to work there. And with that being the case, they can be a little bit choosy. Now, in the early days, they hired 1 out of every 10 that came through the door. That lessened over the years. But one of the things Disney has done historically with their hiring process that I think is really clever, they built opt-out moments into the hiring process. So, for instance, somebody shows up at your location saying they want a job. You say, are you sure you want this? Oh, yeah, I want it. All right. So for Disney, they would put them in a side room where they would watch a video, and the video would say, you'll have to shave your mustache, no visible tattoos, you need reliable transportation, you need to live within 50 miles, all the non-negotiables. And then after that, they would sit and wait and have a preliminary interview. And during the preliminary interview, the interviewer would say, now, you realize you'd have to shave your mustache. You realize you'd have to do this. You realize you'd have to do this. Are you sure you want this? And then there would be a follow-up interview maybe a day or two later, and the same questions would be asked over and over again. The goal is to give people a chance to say, you know what, this really isn't for me. So we were talking Lowe's Foods a minute ago. People are going to have to do the chicken dance. So a typical interview, you would say, are you willing to do the chicken dance? And they would say, yeah, of course, I'm going to tell you I'm willing to do the chicken dance. But then what the Lowe's manager would do is stand up, put a CD on in the boombox, and say, okay, let's do the chicken dance. And one of two things is going to happen. That prospective employee is going to think, hey, this isn't for me, or is going to think, I love this place. But you will have spared yourself having to terminate them at a later date, because your entire hiring process is aligned with making sure that you opt in the right people. And one final thing I want to say, because I went over it very quickly, I think it's really important to have a pre-hiring, legal, of course, pre-hiring test to verify that the person you're going to hire...
Excellent answer. And Lenn, we've got about 6 minutes here, so I think we probably ought to move on and grab some more questions at the very end.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. Number 5, process matters more than product. Invariably, every day at the Magic Kingdom, people lose their cars. Of course they lose their cars. Their actual cars at home, they're in a rental. All the rentals are white. They're all in the same lot. There's like 10,000 of them. So how do you find your car? Well, Disney over time has realized that this is an issue, so they document every row they park at the time in the morning they park those cars in that row, because they know, like if you look, I think that says row 41, Aladdin, on the lower right, they know that most people can tell you when they arrived. So it seems like magic, but it's really just a process. And they have processes for everything. But it's not just processes, because most people have processes. But Walt said, Disneyland's like a piece of clay. If I don't like something, I'm not stuck with it. I can reshape and revamp. I'll always think what's wrong and how can it be improved. Well, Disney continually does this with something I call a plussing process. So here's an example. Had this situation in the United Kingdom at Epcot. Now, this is the pub. To the left of the pub, there's a restaurant. So a guy with his wife and his 2 kids, he'd walk up to the restaurant podium and he'd say, I'd like some fish and chips to go. And the host or hostess at the podium would ask if he had a reservation, and obviously he did not. So they would say, well, sorry, this is a sit-down restaurant. However, maybe if you go into the pub, they'll order some for you. So he'd go into the pub, he'd say, I'd like some fish and chips. The bartender would take the order reluctantly, and then say, okay, wait in the corner over here and we'll bring it to you. And then the guy would say, no, this is a bar. I'm not going to sit here with my kids. Never mind. Well, Disney put this process in place that it's like a 6-step process where anyone at any level can identify a problem, and then the management with that person or that employee base can decide to continue or not. And what they did was they put clipboards in the hostess stand and in the pub, and anytime someone asked for fish and chips, they just did a hash mark. And wouldn't you know that there were a lot of people asking for fish and chips. So they tried something. They put a little portable rolling stand-up with a sign that said fish and chips. And sales were brisk. So they put up a tent. Sales continued to be brisk. So finally they built this building on the left. This building, in its first year of operation, was a $1.3 million business. Now, this is revenue that some suit sitting in an office would never have seen. It's revenue that the guest was happy to part with because you were serving a guest need, you were making them happy, and you were increasing the bottom line at the same time. And this continuous improvement process, plussing process I call it, goes on all the time at Disney. Everybody's looking for what's wrong with the thing and how can they plus it up. I have a non-Disney example here. Our viewers may know this, but there's a coffee cup without a thing under it. Sorry, I forgot what you call it. Another coffee cup with one. Coaster, yeah. Do you know why there's a coaster under one and not the other? And I'll give you the answer. If you ask for decaf at a Cracker Barrel, they put a coaster under your cup. That way, the servers can just come and pour coffee at will, and they know which coffee to put in your cup. Really smart, really simple, but very good guest service. So, process tips. Establish effective processes. Codify the response for any situation that occurs, so you've always figured out what to do if this happens. Develop an aggressive plussing process that everyone is involved in, because nobody knows like the person who's on the front line, and plus everything, every time. And this question might come up, so let me just say that when Disney put this process in place, they spent gobs of money training everybody how to do it. So it's expensive, but it has paid them back many times over. After all, an unhappy guest who's told he can't take ice cream into a queue is not a happy guest. So those are the 5 lessons. What can you do with these? How can you use them? Gary, I'll turn it over to you for a second.
Thanks, Len. I've just put up a survey here. I'd like to get everybody's thoughts on this. What ideas can you apply from this session? Even if you can't apply them in your work, which ones do you think are worth implementing back in your current position, or you'd like to remember them for later? And Len, we have a question here I'd like to get to you before we end today, and that is, what about union environments where managers are limited to what they can do and the company impact is limited?
Well, would it surprise you to know that Walt Disney World is a heavy unionized environment?
That surprises me. I didn't know that. Can you talk more about then how can they do all this in a union environment?
Well, it is a right to work state, so you don't have to be in a union. So I should say that part. But if it makes the employee's job better, they've been able to get the unions to go along, and obviously you have to live within a union contract. But I'll tell you what, when I was a supervisor there, I valued having a shop steward in the room when I was giving a reprimand, because then I knew what I was doing was going to hold up, that I was doing the right thing. And it comes down to partnership, dialogue, knowing your contract, living within your contract, not treating them as the enemy, even if they're trying to treat you as the enemy, and just working within the confines. But yes, it can work.
Well, that's great. That is a completely different answer than I was expecting. So thank you. I'm glad somebody asked that question. HDL asked that, and Tom Capone asked, how does a small company? This is an interesting question. How does a small company do things the Disney way when money's tight and every dollar counts?
Well, it doesn't cost a lot of money to come up with a purpose statement. It doesn't cost a lot of money to articulate that purpose statement at every meeting, every event. It doesn't cost a lot of money to set in place a discipline, reprimand, coaching promotion system based on that purpose statement. What it requires is effort, not necessarily
and
money.
focus, right? So that's a great thought to kind of wrap up on here. I appreciate a lot of people have entered. What's that, Lenn? Say it again.
Let me say one other thing, because this has come up with my clients a lot. What it's about is intentionality. Being very intentional in everything you do. And very intentional towards a goal.
Oh, no.
Sorry, I wanted to get that in there.
So, do you have a couple of minutes more for a few more questions? Okay.
I do.
Okay,
if
I do.
Time,
so, would Walt approve of what Disney does now?
That's a tough question. And the reason it's a tough question is because Walt never did anything the same way twice. And he was always 2 steps ahead of the rest of the world. I mean, they told him nobody will cry for a cartoon character. He did Snow White anyway. They told him TV's the enemy. He went on TV. They told him amusement parks, why do you want to build one of those? They're so dirty. And his wife was one of the people telling him that this wouldn't work at every step of the way. I believe there's 2 things wrong with the Walt would be rolling over in his grave if he saw this approach. One, he was cremated, so there's no way he's rolling over in his grave. But on a more serious level, nobody knows what he would have done. He would have been so far ahead of us that I think that there are things that have happened since him that he would have loved. He would stand up and cheer for Animal Kingdom. Now, I'm not saying that he wouldn't find better ways to do things, but he would just love what's there with the safari ride. So I don't think he would object too much. I think he'd find things to improve, but I think he'd be really proud to know that the company that they had to go to finance Disneyland, which was ABC, they now own. I think he would be tickled pink with that. So yeah, I think on balance he'd be happy.
That's great. I want to put up a poll that we might have asked at the beginning if I'd have thought about it, but I'd like to know who has been to Disneyland and who has been to Disney World, and I'm just going to put that right over here, and I'll show you the results as we go here. We have about 330 people in the session now. So, yeah, everybody's good. Thanks for jumping in, everybody. That's what I love about our members of the Train Mag Network. Yeah, and people are saying both, and I am sorry I didn't, yeah, good. That's a good way to do both. I forgot to open it up. Yeah, okay. Great. Thank you very much. Lenn, other comments that you sound like I might have cut you off there? Okay.
No, I don't think we could talk about next steps. So
yeah, they sure can.
See my slide. Okay. CareLikeAMouse.com or at Amazon.com, you can get the Care Like a Mouse book, which details the steps that would be required to put this kind of system in place. I also write a biweekly news article, and that October training session, Conquering the Creatures of the Classroom, at 9 a.m. Pacific time on October 31st, plus the 2 sessions Gary mentioned in 2020. So those are some things we can do to further this
Great.
session.
Well, I'm putting up a poll asking people to rate this session, and not anything very scientific. I just want to give people an opportunity to do that, because I have a feeling I might know what many of the answers might be. And so if you'll kindly do that in the bottom right of your screen there, I would appreciate all of your input. Thanks very much. And Lenn, another question that came up. You and I were talking about this yesterday. Has Disney become too big, or can it become too big? Do you have any thoughts on that?
It would be nice if it were smaller, more communal with its employees. It has gotten very large. But the problem is that unless you get large, you get swallowed by a bigger fish. And the primary goal in my mind would be to keep the Walt Disney Company separate, as a separate entity, that can pursue its happiness mantra while pleasing the shareholders. And you can't do that if somebody buys you out. And it's pretty large. Yes, it is. But it's the best hedge to protect Walt.
So it's probably best for the stockholders.
Yeah, it's not too bad for the stockholders. It's not too bad for retirees like me, too. But the reality is, if you're a small player, you're going to get bought out, and then who knows what happens to what Walt.
Good. Another request we had, a couple of people asked if you could review, please, the points from Lesson 2. Okay.
All right, let me back up here. The idea is to set goals and parameters in place so that decisions can be made, but not to make the decisions yourself. Now, there are some decisions that have to be made at a leadership level, and some at a CEO level, and some at a training design level. But the goal is to leave as much wiggle room as possible so that the people dealing with guests, customers, or even the trainers teaching a class can make decisions and have the parameters to work within so that they know that they're making a sound decision based on what's been laid out for them.
Great, thank you. And so I guess to wrap it up, I want to remind everybody that Lenn will be back with us, first of all, on October 31st. So very soon you'll be able to register for that. Keep that in mind. Probably in the certainly by this Friday, I'll make sure that Keith has put that up. And also, as you can see in front of you, March 5th, Lenn will be talking about caring like a mouse and how to engage your customers. And then on June 3rd, Lenn will be back with with Disney's leadership strategies that you can teach your people. So, Lenn, thank you very much. We really appreciate you sticking around extra and answering all these questions and sharing all this wonderful information with us. Any final words you want to sign off with?
Yeah, just one thing. Go to Disney, look at how these techniques work, watch it close, or reach out to me and we can have a dialogue. Read the book. Do whatever you can to see these things in practice. And then if you do those things, and even if you don't do them, I only have one thing to say, and that is in the words of a very famous mouse. I'll see you real soon.
Very nice, Lenn. Very nice. Well, I'll see you in next February at Training 2020 in Orlando. And I look forward to that and also to our October 31st webinar. Thank you very much. Thank you to everybody today for attending, and we'll look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Take care, everybody. Thanks again, Lenn. Wonderful job.
Thank you.